There are moments in life when a single mistake changes everything. A second of distraction, a rushed decision, and suddenly you're on a completely different path than the one you planned. For me, that moment happened on a rainy Friday night when I got into the wrong car. But let me rewind a little. My name is Grace Peterson. At least that's the name I use now. I'm 26 and work as a barista at a quiet coffee shop in the financial district of Kansas City, Missouri. It's the kind of place people use for quick business meetings or as a silent retreat between appointments. Nothing glamorous, nothing memorable, exactly the way I need it to be. 8 months ago, I ran away from Chicago. It wasn't a dramatic escape with pre-packed bags and pre-booked tickets. It was chaotic, desperate. The kind you make when you finally understand that staying means completely losing who you are. I was engaged to Marcus Holden, a successful, charming lawyer, the kind of man my family adored. On paper, we were the perfect couple. But paper holds up to anything, doesn't it? What started as attention and care gradually turned into control. Marcus needed to know where I was all the time, who I spoke to, what I wore. At first I thought it was love, that he was just concerned about me. It took me far too long to realize that love doesn't make you feel small, doesn't isolate you from everyone you love, doesn't make you afraid to disagree with someone. In the final months of our relationship, the psychological tension began to take on a physical form. A push during an argument, a hand squeezing my arm too hard. Marcus always apologized afterward, brought me white flowers, and swore it would never happen again. But it did. And each time I felt my courage disappear a little more. Until one night, after a particularly violent argument, I just left. I grabbed what fit into a backpack, emptied my small bank account, and bought a bus ticket to Kansas City, a city where I knew no one, where I could start over, invisible. I cut my long blonde hair into a practical, modern bob. I changed informal documents, avoided social media, and got a job with cash tips. I rented a tiny apartment in Westport, a vibrant and diverse neighborhood where no one asked too many questions. I built a safe routine: work, home, work, home. No deep friendships, no entanglements, no risks. I live with a constant, silent fear of being found. Every tall blonde man I catch a glimpse of on the street makes my heart race. Every phone notification makes me tense. I sleep poorly, always on alert, always ready to run again if needed. It's an existence, not a life, but it's safe. And safety is all I have. That Friday started like all the others. I woke up at 5 in the morning to the blaring phone alarm, took a quick shower, put on my simple uniform of black jeans and the cafe's t-shirt, and took the bus to the financial district. The shift was long and exhausting. Impatient, customers wanted complicated orders made in record time. The coffee machine malfunctioned and had to be reset 3 times. And my feet ached in old flats that needed to be replaced months ago, but would still have to last a little longer. When I finally finished at 9 at night, I was drained, physically and emotionally depleted by that kind of fatigue that goes beyond the muscles, that settles in your bones. And then my car broke down. Right there, in the parking lot behind the cafe, my 2008 Honda Civic simply refused to start. I tried 3 times, the engine making that painful sound of a final surrender. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and took a deep breath, fighting back tears of frustration. I didn't have money for repairs. I barely had money to get through the month. That's when it started to rain, not that soft romantic rain from the movies, but the thick, cold Midwest rain that soaks you in seconds. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and opened the Uber app. The ride would cost almost $15, money I couldn't spend, but I also couldn't stay there all night. I confirmed the request. The app showed that a black car would be there in 2 minutes. When I saw the sleek black sedan pull up in front of the cafe, I didn't think twice. It was pouring, I was tired, and I just wanted to get home. I opened the back door in a hurry and got in, tossing my purse onto the seat next to me and pulling the door shut behind me. Sorry for the wait. Traffic was... The words died in my throat. There was a man sitting in the back seat with me. My heart immediately pounded, panic flooding me. It wasn't the driver, there was someone else driving. This man was sitting exactly where I was, watching me with an expression that was a mix of surprise and something that might have been amusement. And what a man. Even in my state of panic, my brain registered details. Tall, that was obvious even sitting down. Wide shoulders perfectly filling a dark suit that seemed custom-made for every inch of his body. Black hair slicked back with gel, a few rebellious strands falling over his forehead. Dark brown eyes so penetrating, they made me feel simultaneously exposed and safe. It didn't make sense. There was an intensity about him that went beyond physical appearance. It was the posture, the way he occupied the space with an absolute natural confidence. The kind of presence that commands attention without needing to ask for it. I'm so sorry, I managed to stammer, already grabbing my purse and reaching for the door handle. Wrong car, I thought. That it was your Uber, he finished, his voice deep and surprisingly calm. He had a slight accent I couldn't immediately place. Something European, maybe Italian, softened by years in the States. Yes, my mistake. I'll just get out now. It's raining very hard out there, he interrupted gently, raising a hand in a reassuring gesture, not threatening, just courteous. And you're clearly exhausted. Where do you need to go? I looked at him, confused. My survival instinct, honed by months of hypervigilance, was screaming at me to get out of that car immediately. But there was something in the way he spoke, in the genuinely concerned look on his face, that made me hesitate. I can't accept, I replied, still clutching my purse to my chest like a shield. It was my mistake. I'll just wait for my real Uber. He nodded, as if he completely respected my decision, but then he looked out the window at the rain that was now coming down in violent sheets, then back at me. May I suggest we just wait a few minutes, until the rain lets up a bit? I wouldn't want you to get drenched trying to get out. There was an annoying logic to it. And honestly, I was so tired that the thought of stepping out into that icy downpour made me want to cry. All right, I agreed hesitantly, leaning back against the seat but keeping my purse on my lap, ready to bolt at any moment. We were silent for a few seconds, only the sound of the rain hammering on the car's roof. That's when I noticed the luxurious interior of the vehicle, soft leather, impeccable finish, that distinctive scent of an expensive car. It was definitely not an Uber. Salvatore, he said suddenly, extending his hand. Salvatore Castellano. I looked at the outstretched hand, then at his face. I didn't want to shake it. Shaking hands felt like establishing some kind of connection I wasn't ready to make. But it also seemed rude to refuse, and there was something in the polite way he introduced himself that disarmed me. Grace, I replied quietly, briefly shaking his hand. It was large, warm, and surprisingly gentle. It's a pleasure, Grace. He released my hand immediately, not holding it for too long, respecting my personal space. So, a perfectly understandable mistake on a night like this. It happens. Doesn't usually happen to me, I mumbled, more to myself than to him. Do you work there? He gestured toward the cafe. Yes, I answered curtly, not wanting to give too much information. Salvatore seemed to notice my reluctance and didn't press. Instead, he simply watched the rain, giving me space to process the bizarre situation I was in. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. Look, he said after a few minutes, turning to me with a sincere expression. I understand this is strange and that you don't know me, but I'm going to make you a genuine offer. I can have my driver take you home. No strings attached, no expectations. You give me the address, we drop you off, and we go our separate ways. Why would you do that? I asked, suspicious. He gave a half smile, the first I'd seen, and it was disturbingly attractive. Because my mother raised me to be a gentleman, and because you look like you've had a very long day. I should have refused. Every rational fiber of my being was telling me to refuse, wait for my Uber, and keep my distance from this mysterious and dangerously charming man. But I looked at the rain, at the clock on the dashboard that showed it was nearly 10 at night, at my aching feet and my deep exhaustion, and I thought, just this once, I'll accept help. Westport, I finally said. 40th and Main. Salvatore nodded to the driver, who immediately put the address into the GPS without a word. The car started to move smoothly. During the 15-minute drive, a strange and charged conversation developed. Salvatore asked simple questions. How long I had worked at the cafe, if I was from Kansas City originally. I answered vaguely, giving just enough information to be polite, but not enough to be personal. But he also noticed things I would have preferred he didn't. The way my eyes automatically scanned the streets, looking for, what? Threats? Familiar faces? The way my hands trembled slightly, even inside the warm car. The subtle tremor in my shoulders that had nothing to do with the cold. "Are you okay?" he asked at one point, his voice low and genuinely concerned. Yes, I lied automatically, just tired. He didn't seem to believe me, but he didn't press. When we finally arrived at my modest building, so different from the luxurious world that car represented, I expected to simply get out and never see that man again. But before I could open the door, Salvatore took something from the inner pocket of his jacket. It was a card. Small, cream-colored, with an expensive texture. No name, no logo. Just a phone number embossed in gold. "If you need anything," he said, extending the card. "Anything at all." I looked at the card, then at him. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Salvatore held my gaze for a long moment, and there was something in those dark eyes that made me feel like he saw more than I wanted to show. Because I recognize someone who's running from something. And sometimes, it's good to know you're not completely alone. I took the card with hesitant fingers, not knowing what to say. I mumbled a thank you, got out of the car, and ran to the building entrance under the rain that was finally letting up. When I got to my apartment and closed the door behind me, I leaned against it and slid to the floor, holding the mysterious card. My heart was still racing, but not just from fear or panic. There was something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity, interest, and, if I were completely honest with myself, an attraction that deeply scared me. That night, lying in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, I couldn't sleep. All I saw when I closed my eyes were those penetrating dark brown eyes, and that deep voice saying, "Because I recognize someone who's running from something." Salvatore Castellano. I didn't know who he was, what he did, or why he was being so kind. But something told me that my carefully built life of invisibility and safety had just begun to crumble. The next few days were strange. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Salvatore Castellano. The name rolled around in my mind during my shifts at the cafe, as I made lattes and cappuccinos on autopilot. I caught myself touching the card he gave me, stored in my jeans pocket, then transferred to my wallet, then to my nightstand drawer. As if moving, it could change the fact that it existed. I did what anyone would do in the digital age. I looked him up. Salvatore Castellano appeared in a few local news reports and business articles. Owner of 3 high-end Italian restaurants in and around Kansas City. Investor in luxury commercial real estate. Occasional philanthropist with donations to local causes and cultural institutions. The photos showed a serious man at formal events, always impeccably dressed, often next to other important figures in the city. On paper, he was legitimate, respectable even. But there was something between the lines that bothered me. The vague way the articles described his diverse businesses. The fact that, despite his public presence, personal information about him was almost non-existent. No wife or girlfriend mentioned. No visible family. It was as if he existed in a carefully controlled information bubble. Part of me knew I should forget it. Throw the card away. Continue my safe, predictable life. But then the following Tuesday, he showed up at the cafe. It was almost 8:30 at night. I was wiping down tables, getting ready to close in 30 minutes, when I heard the bell on the door. I looked up, ready to say we were about to close, and the words died on my lips. Salvatore was standing there, in a dark overcoat over his suit, a few drops of rain on his perfectly styled hair. He saw me and gave that half smile I was starting to recognize. "Hello, Grace." My heart jumped. "What are you doing here?" "Coffee," he replied simply, walking up to the counter. "A double espresso, if you're still making them." My hands trembled slightly as I prepared the drink. I felt his eyes watching me, not in an invasive way, but with an attention that made me hyper-aware of every movement. When I placed the cup in front of him, our fingers touched briefly. "Thank you," he said, and then went to sit at a table in the corner, pulling a newspaper from the leather briefcase he was carrying. And he just stayed there. I continued my closing work, trying not to look as conscious of his presence as I was. He drank the coffee slowly, read the newspaper, occasionally looked out the window. He didn't try to make conversation, didn't bother me. He just was there. When I finally locked the door and turned off the lights, I turned around and he was standing, waiting. "May I take you home?" he asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I should have said no. I should have taken the bus like I always did when my car was broken. "All right," I heard my own voice say. The luxurious car was waiting in front of the cafe, the same silent driver at the wheel. We got in the back seat, and the familiar drive began. "Did you get your car fixed?" Salvatore asked. "Not yet. I need to save up for the repairs." He nodded, not offering financial help, which, strangely, I appreciated. Marcus always threw money at problems, using it as a form of control. Salvatore just acknowledged the situation and moved on. "How was your day?" he asked then. And somehow I started to tell him. Small things. A particularly difficult customer. The coffee machine that was finally fixed. The book I was reading on breaks. He listened with genuine attention, asking occasional questions that showed he was really listening. When we arrived at my building, neither of us made a move to get out. "May I ask a question?" he said after a moment. "Depends on the question." "Why do you always look like you're ready to run?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't." "You do," he interrupted gently. "Your eyes are always looking for exits. Your hands stay near your purse as if you need to be ready to grab it and run at any moment. You sit with your back to the wall whenever you can." I was silent, my heart racing. He had noticed things I thought I was hiding perfectly. "You don't have to tell me," he continued, when he saw my expression. "But I want you to know that whatever you're running from, it won't find you while you're with me." There was an absolute certainty in the way he said it that made me believe him. "What about you?" I asked, turning the tables. "Why is a man like you interested in giving a barista a ride home?" He smiled. Not the polite half smile, but a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "Because you got into my car by mistake. And somehow, it was the most real thing that's happened to me in a long time." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply said goodnight and got out of the car, feeling his eyes on me until I went into the building. It became a ritual. Every night, for the last 30 minutes before the cafe closed, Salvatore would show up. He always ordered the same double espresso, always sat at the same table in the corner, always waited patiently while I finished closing, and then he would take me home. During those 15-minute rides, we started to really get to know each other. I found out he was born in Sicily, but came to the States when he was 10. That he grew up in New York before moving to Kansas City 8 years ago to expand businesses. That he had a deep love for literature, especially Italian authors like Italo Calvino and Giuseppe Tomasi, Di Lampedusa, but also American ones like Cormac McCarthy and Don DeLillo. "You read McCarthy?" I asked, surprised one night when he mentioned Blood Meridian. "It's brutal and philosophical at the same time," he replied. "There's a raw honesty to the violence he describes. He doesn't romanticize, doesn't excuse. He just shows human nature in its most stripped-down form." The way he talked about books, about art, about the world, there were layers to him I hadn't expected. He wasn't just the sophisticated businessman. There was depth, thought, and occasional melancholy that I recognized in myself. I shared things too. I told him about my abandoned dream of being a photojournalist, of capturing moments of raw truth through a lens. I showed him some old photos on my phone, images I took years ago, before Marcus, when I still believed my life could be extraordinary. "These are impressive," Salvatore said, zooming in on a photo of a child playing in a public fountain in Chicago, the sunset light creating a golden halo around her. "Why did you stop?" "Life happened," I answered vaguely. He didn't press, but the way he looked at me made it clear he understood that life happened was a euphemism for something much more painful. The conversation stretched longer and longer. When we arrived at my building, neither of us wanted the night to end. We would stay in the car, the engine off, just talking in the dim light. 20 minutes turned into 30, then 40, sometimes an entire hour. He asked me questions no one had asked in years. Not about what I did, but about who I was, what made me laugh, what kept me up at night, what my favorite childhood memory was, if I believed in destiny or choice. "Choice," I answered one night. "Definitely choice. Destiny is just an excuse we use when we make bad choices." "Interesting," he murmured, his eyes fixed on mine. So you chose to get into my car that night. Technically, it was a mistake. Or it was a choice you didn't know you were making. There was something in the way he said it, in the intensity of his gaze, that made my stomach flutter. The attraction between us was impossible to ignore now. It was in every prolonged look, in every accidental touch, in the electric tension that filled the small space of the car. When he leaned in to open the door for me and our faces were inches apart, I could feel the warmth of his body, the masculine scent of expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely his. There were moments when his eyes fell to my lips and lingered for a second longer than they should. Moments when he touched my shoulder lightly to get my attention, and the touch seemed to burn through the fabric of my shirt. Moments when our eyes met in the rearview mirror and I saw something dark and intense in his eyes that made my heart race in a completely different way than fear. I started to look forward to the end of my shift. I'd catch myself looking at the clock, counting the minutes until he showed up. I'd fix my hair in the reflection of the coffee machine, apply a bit of gloss discreetly. Small things I hadn't done in months, things I swore I would never do again for any man. But Salvatore wasn't like Marcus. He didn't demand my attention, he earned it. He didn't control me, he respected me. He didn't belittle me, he truly saw me. 3 weeks after that first accidental meeting, something changed. It was a particularly cold winter night, the kind of cold that cuts to the bone. When we got in the car, I was shivering even in my thin coat. Salvatore immediately turned up the heat and, without asking, took off his overcoat and placed it over my shoulders. "You'll be cold," I protested weakly. "I'm fine," he replied. And there was something in the simplicity of that gesture, giving his own coat without expecting anything in return, that made me feel like something inside me was cracking open. When we arrived at my building and settled into our ritual of prolonged conversation, something different hung in the air, a tension that was heavier, more charged. "Grace," Salvatore said suddenly, turning fully to face me in the seat. "Can I be honest with you?" My heart sped up. "Yes. I didn't come to the cafe all these nights for the espresso." "I know," I whispered. "And these conversations in the car, they've become the best part of my days." "Me too." He slowly raised his hand, giving me time to pull away, and gently touched my face. His thumb traced the line of my cheek with a tenderness that made me close my eyes. "Do you want to come up?" The words came out of my mouth before I could think better of it. "For some real coffee?" His eyes widened slightly, the first time I'd seen him genuinely surprised. "Are you sure?" I wasn't sure of anything, except that I didn't want this night to end like all the others, with him leaving and me going up alone. Yes. My apartment was tiny and embarrassingly simple compared to his world. A one-bedroom studio with a kitchenette, minimal furniture, walls with peeling paint in some places. But Salvatore walked in as if it were a palace, observing every detail with genuine interest. His eyes scanned the old photographs I'd tacked to the wall, images of Chicago, of people in unstaged moments, of light and shadow captured in perfect instants. He stopped in front of an old DSLR camera on the shelf, broken for months, that I couldn't afford to fix. "Is this your camera?" he asked, picking it up carefully. It was. It fell a few months ago. It needs parts I can't afford right now. He looked at the camera for a long moment, as if memorizing every detail, before carefully placing it back. I made coffee, a real one, brewed in the mocha pot that was one of the few valuable things I'd brought from Chicago. We, Tektin, sat on the small second-hand couch, mugs in hand, closer than we had ever been. "Thank you for letting me in," Salvatore said quietly. "Thank you for being here, for all these nights, for listening to me." "Grace," he began, then stopped, as if carefully choosing his words. "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. Here it was, the revelation of who he really was, of the danger he represented. "My life isn't simple," he continued, his eyes fixed on the coffee mug. "The businesses I run, the people I get involved with, not all of it is completely clean. There are gray areas, hard decisions, things I've done that I'm not proud of." "Are you telling me it's dangerous to know you?" He finally looked at me. "I'm telling you that you deserve to know that my world has shadows, and that being near me might mean being near those shadows too." I should have been scared. I should have asked him to leave, but instead, I heard my own voice ask, "What if I don't care about the shadows? What if I've already lived in the dark and your shadows don't scare me as much as you think?" Something changed in his expression, surprise, relief, and something more intense. "Then I need to tell you about when I was 16 and my father was arrested," he said slowly. "When I learned that trust is a luxury that can cost you everything. When I built walls around myself so high that I forgot what it was like to let someone in." And then he started to truly talk. He told me about growing up in a family where loyalty was law, where weakness was punished, where he learned from an early age to be strong or be destroyed, about building his empire with sweat, blood, and impossible decisions, about living in a world where friends could become enemies in an instant, and where showing vulnerability was signing your own death warrant. "I got good at not feeling," he said, his voice hoarse, "at not letting anyone close enough to hurt me. It worked for years. And then you got into my car by mistake, and what?" I whispered. "And you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a reputation, not a name, not power. Just me." I placed my mug on the coffee table and held his face in my hands. "I know what it's like to build walls, Salvatore. I've spent the last 8 months living behind them, but maybe we can try to tear some down, together." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch as if it were water in the desert, and then he kissed me. It was tender at first, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid of scaring me. His lips were soft, warm, questioning. I responded to the kiss, my hand sliding to the back of his neck, my fingers tangling in his hair. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, charged with weeks of unresolved tension. His hand found my waist, pulling me closer, and I went willingly, losing myself in the sensation, in the warmth, in the perfect rightness of us. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I don't want to rush you," he said, his voice husky. "You've been through a lot. You deserve someone who will go at your pace." Something in me, the part that had spent months being cautious, being careful, being invisible, finally broke. "What if I don't want to go slow?" I whispered against his lips. I saw desire darken his eyes, but I also saw control, a determination to do this right. "Then we'll make sure you're choosing this for the right reasons," he replied, kissing my forehead gently. "Not because you're afraid of being alone, or because I make you feel safe, but because you genuinely want this. You want me." And in that moment, with this powerful and dangerous man treating me as if I were precious and worthy of respect, I knew the truth. "I do," I said with certainty. "I want you." The smile he gave me was dazzling. "Then you have me." The next few weeks were the happiest I'd had in years. Salvatore became part of my routine in a way I never thought would be possible again. He still showed up at the cafe every night, but now it wasn't just about rides home. It was late-night dinners in my tiny apartment, with takeout spread on the floor as we watched old movies. It was lazy Sunday mornings, where he'd bring coffee and croissants from an expensive French bakery across town, just because I mentioned once that I missed them. He never spent the entire night. He would always leave before dawn, saying he had matters to attend to. Part of me knew these matters were the kind I'd rather not know the details of, but he never lied when I asked directly, never treated me as if I were too fragile for the truth. "I had a meeting that didn't go as planned," he said one morning when he showed up with a fresh cut above his eyebrow, already cared for, but still visible. "Are you okay?" I asked, gently touching near the wound. "I am now," he replied, catching my hand and kissing my palm. I started to get to know his world little by little. First was Vincent Rossi, his right-hand man, a serious man in his 40s, with eyes that missed nothing and an absolute loyalty to Salvatore. He watched me with caution at first, clearly evaluating whether I was a dangerous distraction or something more permanent. "She's important," I overheard Salvatore say to Vincent one night, when they thought I wasn't listening. We were at one of Salvatore's restaurants after hours, and I had gone to the restroom. "Then you need to make sure she's protected," Vincent replied, his voice low but firm. "People will notice. They're already noticing." "I know," Salvatore said, and there was a note of concern I rarely heard from him. "That's why I need you to keep your eyes open." I didn't ask about that conversation when I returned, but something shifted in me. The reality of Salvatore's world was starting to become less abstract and more concrete. I also met Isabella Moretti at a formal dinner Salvatore insisted I accompany him to. She was stunning, an Italian woman in her mid-30s, dressed in Versace that probably cost more than a year's rent for me, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So your Grace," she said, evaluating me from head to toe with a look that made me feel instantly inadequate in the simple dress Salvatore had gently bought for me for the occasion. "Salvatore told me about you." "I hope good things," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "He said you were interesting." The way she said the word made it clear it wasn't a compliment, a change from the usual types he gets involved with. Salvatore appeared by my side before I could respond, his hand finding the small of my back in a possessive but comforting gesture. "Isabella," he said, his voice cordial but with a warning edge. "Always a pleasure." "Of course, dear," she replied, her cold smile staying perfectly in place. "We should schedule a lunch soon, to discuss those businesses I mentioned." When she walked away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume, I turned to Salvatore. "You too." "A long time ago," he admitted. Briefly, no strings attached, purely professional in the end. "She hasn't been relevant in years." "She doesn't seem to think so." He held my chin gently, forcing me to face him. "The only woman relevant in my life is you. Isabella knows that, even if she doesn't like it." But the interaction left a bitter taste. I saw the way other people looked at us at that event: curiosity, speculation, and in some cases, thinly veiled disapproval. I was clearly an outsider in that world of luxury and power, and everyone knew it. It was around this time that Salvatore gave me a gift that made me cry. I arrived at my apartment after a shift and found a large box at my door. Inside, carefully wrapped, was a professional DSLR camera. Not just a new model, but a state-of-the-art one, with extra lenses and all the accessories a photographer could dream of. The card simply read, "Because some dreams deserve a second chance." I called him immediately, tears streaming down my face. "Salvatore, this is too much." "It's exactly enough," he interrupted gently. "I saw the way you looked at that broken camera, as if it were a part of you that died. I want to see you alive again, Grace. Completely alive." I started photographing again. Timidly at first, just a few clicks here and there, then with more confidence. I captured Kansas City in ways I had never seen before. The way the morning light hit the buildings in the financial district, the faces of people at the farmer's market, the texture of the old streets in Westport. And I photographed Salvatore. He became my favorite subject, not the formal, controlled poses I saw in his public photos, but the unguarded moments. Reading the newspaper in the morning with coffee in his hand, the soft light creating shadows on his face, laughing at something Vincent said, transforming his usually serious expression into something young and free, the tense line of his jaw when he was focused on a business call. "You make me look different," he commented one night, looking at the photos on my laptop. "I photograph what I see," I replied. "And I see a man who is so much more than the mask he shows the world." He pulled me onto his lap, kissing my neck. "You see me better than I deserve. Maybe you deserve more than you think." But the past never stays buried for long. It started subtly. A man I swore I saw across the street who looked terribly like Marcus. A car that looked like his parked near the cafe for several days in a row. I thought I was being paranoid. After all, I had lived in fear for so long that my brain saw threats where there were none. Until the flowers arrived. I came home one afternoon and found a bouquet of white roses at my door. There was no card, no name, just white roses, exactly what Marcus used to give me when he apologized after an argument, after making me feel small, after squeezing my arm too hard. My blood ran cold. I picked up the flowers with trembling hands and threw them in the trash, but the damage was done. Marcus had found me. Somehow, after all these months, he had tracked me to Kansas City. I didn't tell Salvatore, not immediately. Part of me was ashamed that my past was following me, ashamed of dragging him into my problems, ashamed to admit how terrified I was. Another part was afraid of how he would react. I had seen what happened when someone threatened something Salvatore considered his. I had seen the coldness in his eyes, the capacity for controlled violence. I didn't want him to become that because of me. So I pretended everything was fine. I smiled when he showed up that night, let him hug me, and pretended I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. But Salvatore wasn't easy to fool. "You're tense," he commented after a few days, massaging my shoulders as we watched TV. "What's going on?" "Just a stressful day at work," I lied. He turned my face to his dark eyes studying every nuance of my expression. "Grace, don't lie to me, please." The please undid me. He never asked, he commanded, suggested, offered. But asking like that, with that raw vulnerability, broke down my defenses. "I think he found me," I whispered. "Who?" But by the way his entire body went tense, he already knew. Marcus, my ex. I saw a man who looked like him a few days ago, and then I took a deep breath. Someone left white roses at my door. He used to give me white roses when... My voice broke. The transformation in Salvatore was instant. The gentleness was replaced by something cold and lethal, not directed at me, but at the man who was haunting me. "How long ago?" His voice was controlled, but I recognized the contained rage in it. 3 days. 3 days and you didn't tell me? It wasn't an accusation, it was pain. "Grace, why?" "Because I'm afraid of what you'll do," I admitted. "Because I don't want you to become something you're not because of me. Because I'm ashamed that my past is ruining our present." Salvatore pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Listen carefully," he said against my hair. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. He controlled you, he hurt you. He made you run from your own life. That's not your fault. But, and as for what I'm going to do," he continued, pulling back to look into my eyes, "I'm going to protect you, not with unnecessary violence, not by becoming a monster, but I'm going to make sure he never touches you again, never scares you again, never makes you feel like you have to run again." "How?" "Leave that to me. But I need you to trust me, Grace. I need you to let me handle this." Every instinct told me not to involve him, to deal with this alone as I always had. But I looked into his eyes and saw not just the dangerous man everyone feared, but the man who treated me as if I were precious. "Okay," I whispered. "I trust you." Salvatore acted quickly. He put discreet security around me, men I never saw but whom he assured me were always nearby. He changed the locks on my apartment, installed security cameras in the hallway. Vincent started making the trip with me when Salvatore couldn't be present. "You are not alone in this," Salvatore said repeatedly. "You'll never be alone again." It was comforting and terrifying at the same time. Comforting because for the first time in months, I didn't feel that constant fear. Terrifying because I was letting someone in so completely. Becoming dependent on a protection he could withdraw at any moment. But Marcus was patient. He didn't show up directly. He didn't confront me. It was more insidious than that. Small things started to happen. My car, finally repaired, got a mysterious flat tire. I received a letter at work with no return address, just saying, "We need to talk. You know this isn't over." With each incident, I saw Salvatore become more protective, more tense. I saw the whispered meetings with Vincent, the late-night phone calls on the balcony where he thought I couldn't hear him. "Find him," I heard him say one night. His voice cold as ice. "I want to know where he is, what he's doing, and who he's talking to. And I want to know yesterday." The situation escalated when Marcus got my phone number. The first message came on a Tuesday afternoon. "Grace, I know you're scared, but you don't have to be. I've changed. I went to therapy. I just want to make sure you're okay. Can we talk?" I showed the message to Salvatore that night. He read it with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Do not reply," he said finally, "under any circumstances." I didn't reply, but Marcus kept sending messages. At first they were concerned and gentle. Then they became more insistent. "Why are you ignoring me? After everything we've been through together, I at least deserve a conversation. I saw you're with someone now. That man. Do you know who he really is? What he does? He's dangerous, Grace. I'm worried about you. You've changed. That sweet girl I met is gone. What has he done to you?" And then the messages got darker. "You destroyed my life when you left me. I lost friends. My family questions me. This is all your fault. You're living with a criminal. Is that what you've become? Someone who chooses that kind of man instead of someone who truly loved you? I won't give up on you. You belong to me, Grace. You always have. That last message made me feel physically ill. I showed them all to Salvatore, seeing the cold rage build in his eyes with every word he read. I will handle this, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Today. Salvatore, no, I started. But he held my face in his hands. I promised to protect you, and I will do that. But I also promised to do it the right way. Trust me. I trust you, I said. And it was true. Even scared, even uncertain, I trusted him in a way I had never trusted anyone. But fear and confusion made me make a terrible mistake. The next few nights, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Marcus's messages, about the way he said he had changed, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, if I talked to him directly, I could make him understand that I was happy now, that he needed to move on. It was stupid logic, born of the fear and guilt he had planted in me for years. The rational part of my brain knew that men like Marcus didn't change, that he was manipulating, using the same old tactics. But the part of me that still carried the weight of years of emotional control thought, what if I can solve this without violence? What if I can end this in a way that doesn't drag Salvatore deeper into my problems? So I did the stupidest thing possible. I replied to Marcus's message. We can talk, but only in a public place. Coffee shop on Main Street tomorrow at 3 p.m. Just talk, Marcus. Nothing more. The reply came almost immediately. Thank you, Grace. You won't regret this. I just want to see you again. Make sure you're okay. See you tomorrow. I didn't tell Salvatore. I said I had plans with a friend from work, a lie that made me sick with guilt. He was busy with business meetings, so he didn't question it much, just kissed me and made me promise to call if I needed anything. When I arrived at the cafe the next afternoon, Marcus was already there, and he looked exactly as I remembered, maybe even better. Perfectly cut blonde hair, an expensive but not ostentatious suit. The charming smile that had once made me believe he was a Prince Charming. It was easy to forget, looking at him like this in a crowded cafe in broad daylight, the monster he became behind closed doors. Grace, he said, standing up when I approached. You look beautiful, different, but beautiful. I sat down at the table, keeping my purse on my lap, aware of every possible exit. Marcus, you said you wanted to talk. I've changed, Grace. I really have. He leaned forward, his blue eyes filled with rehearsed sincerity. I started therapy right after you left. I worked on my control issues, my anger. I understood how I hurt you, how I pushed you away. That's good, I replied carefully. I'm glad you're getting help. But I realized something in those sessions, he continued. I realized that you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined everything. I just wanted you to know that. And that if you're ever willing to give me another chance— Marcus, no, I interrupted firmly. I came here to make it clear that it's over, that you need to move on. I'm happy now. I have a new life. With that criminal? The mask slipped slightly, a touch of bitterness entering his voice. With someone who treats me with respect, I replied, keeping my voice firm. Respect? Marcus gave a humorless laugh. Grace, do you know who Salvatore Castellano is? What he does? He's using you, putting you in danger. I just want to save you before it's too late. I don't need to be saved. I need you to accept that there's no future for us. I saw the shift happen, the hardening in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. The charming man disappeared, replaced by something much more familiar and terrifying. You come all this way, you give me hope, and then you throw it all in my face, he said, his voice low but intense. Do you have any idea what's been going through my head these past few months? The hell you put me through? Marcus, we're in public, I said, my heart starting to race. I'm leaving now. I stood up, but he stood up too, his hand grabbing my arm. No, you're not. Not until you hear me out completely. Let go of me, I said through gritted teeth. For a moment, I thought he was going to obey. I thought the presence of other people, the daylight, social norms would be enough. I was wrong. Let's talk this out properly, he said, pulling me toward the exit, in my car, where you can't just run away from me again. And I, trapped in his control again, paralyzed by the fear he had cultivated in me for years, followed him out of the cafe. It was the biggest mistake of my life. The parking lot was less crowded than the cafe. Interior. A few people walked briskly to their cars, heads down against the cold wind, paying no attention to us. Marcus maintained his grip on my arm, not strong enough to leave visible marks, but firm enough to make it clear that it wasn't a request. "Marcus, you're hurting me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even as panic started to rise in my throat. "I'm just guiding you to the car," he replied, his tone almost reasonable. "We need to have a real conversation, Grace. No distractions, no running away. You owe me that." "I don't owe you anything," he stopped abruptly, turning me to face him. His eyes, which I once thought were gentle, were hard, cold. "You owe me everything. 3 years of my life, wedding plans, a future that you destroyed when you decided to be selfish and run away in the middle of the night like a thief. I ran away because you were hurting me. I was loving you," he yelled, and then seemed to realize where we were. He quickly glanced around, then lowered his voice to an intense whisper. "I was loving you the only way I knew how. And you threw everything away. But I forgive you, Grace. I still forgive you. We can fix this." I tried to pull away, but he just tightened his grip. I saw his car, a gleaming black BMW, parked in an isolated corner of the lot. "I am not getting into your car, Marcus." "Yes, you are." It wasn't a question. It was an order, said in the same tone he used when he told me what to wear, who to talk to, how to behave, and my body, trained by years of obedience born of fear, almost gave in. I almost allowed myself to be dragged into that car, into that familiar trap. But then I thought of Salvatore, the way he looked at me, not as a possession, but as a person. The way he asked for my opinion, respected my choices, and celebrated my strength instead of trying to break it. "No," I said with more firmness. "I won't." I managed to break free with a strong pull, stumbling backward. Marcus lunged forward, but this time I was ready. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, the screen already unlocked. "One more step and I'll scream," I warned. "And I'll call the police and Salvatore." Something crossed Marcus's face. It was quick, but I recognized it. It was fear, fear of Salvatore. But then he laughed, a bitter, chilling sound. "Your mafia protector. Do you really think he cares about you, Grace? Men like him don't love, they own. And when they get tired of their possessions, they discard them. I'm trying to save you from that." "You're not trying to save me," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "You're trying to control me again, and I won't let that happen." I saw true rage ignite in his eyes then. The mask of the reasonable man, the man who changed, disappeared completely. "You don't understand," he said, lunging again. "You don't have a choice here." Before I could scream or run, he grabbed my wrist with brutal force, twisting until I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the asphalt with a sickening sound. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with his other hand, dragging me the last few feet to the car. "We're going to have a proper talk," he whispered in my ear. The voice I knew so well, the voice he used when he was about to make me feel like I was crazy, that I was wrong, that everything was my fault. "Somewhere private, where you can't just run away from me again." I struggled, but he was bigger, stronger. He managed to push me into the back seat of the car and quickly got in after me, locking the doors. Before I could try the door on the other side, the car was already moving. He had the keys ready, he had planned this. "Where are we going?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "To a place where we can finally have the conversation we need to have. No interruptions, no criminal coming to rescue you." The drive was a nightmare. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching back to hold my wrist whenever I moved too much. He talked non-stop, about how he had planned our fresh start, about how I was confused and lost, about how he was the only one who truly understood me. "I've prepared everything," he said, almost dreamily. "You'll see. You'll understand that this was what was always supposed to happen." I tried to reason with him, then to beg, then to threaten. Nothing worked. He just kept driving, leaving the city, taking increasingly empty roads. Finally, we arrived in a rural area I didn't recognize. Open fields, a few scattered houses, a lot of empty space between properties. Marcus turned onto a dirt road that led to an isolated cabin surrounded by trees. My family has had this place for generations, he explained as he parked. No one comes here this time of year. It's perfect for us. Real terror hit me then. We weren't in public. There were no witnesses. No one knew where I was, not even Salvatore, because I had lied to him. Marcus got out of the car and opened my door, offering his hand like a gentleman. When I didn't take it, he sighed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Grace. He pulled me out of the car and guided me, firmly but without the earlier violence, as if he had already won, into the cabin. The interior was rustic but well maintained. A living room with a fireplace, a small kitchen, a hallway that presumably led to bedrooms. And I realized with growing horror there were signs of recent preparation. Groceries in the kitchen, clothes folded on a chair, even fresh flowers in a vase. You planned this, I whispered. How long have you been planning this? Ever since I finally found you a few weeks ago, he admitted, locking the front door. At first, I thought I could convince you to come back willingly, but then I saw you. We're too involved with that man, too contaminated. Marcus, this is kidnapping. You can't just keep me here. I'm not keeping you, he corrected, moving around the cabin as if it were just a normal vacation. I'm protecting you. From Castellano, from yourself, from all the bad choices you've been making. When you calm down and really listen to me, you'll understand. He gestured to the couch. Sit down, I'll make some coffee. Remember how you used to like it when I made you coffee on Sunday mornings? I didn't sit. I stood near the door, assessing my options. The lock was complex, requiring a key from both sides. The windows had visible locks. My phone was still in the cafe parking lot. Marcus noticed my assessment and sighed. Grace, there's nowhere to go. We're 40 minutes from the city, in the middle of nowhere. And even if you could get out, where would you go? I just want us to talk, like two adults. He started making coffee in the kitchen, talking the whole time, about how he had analyzed his mistakes, how he went to therapy, probably a lie, how he realized I was the love of his life and that he had been stupid to let me get away. And then I saw you with him, Marcus continued, his voice gaining a sharp edge. Salvatore Castellano, a criminal. You traded someone who truly loved you for a man who probably doesn't even know the meaning of the word love. He has treated me better in 3 months than you did in 3 years, I replied, before I could stop myself. Marcus stopped stirring the coffee. He turned slowly to face me. What did you say? I knew I should backtrack, placate him, use the old survival tactics. But something in me had changed during these months away from him. During my time with Salvatore, I had found my voice again. He respects me. He listens to me. He doesn't try to control me. He makes me feel alive, not like a possession. Alive? Marcus dropped the coffee mug forcefully, the porcelain cracking against the counter. He made you feel alive. Or did he make you feel like what you really are? A woman making desperate choices because she's too scared to recognize that she needs someone to truly take care of her. He started walking toward me, and I instinctively backed up until my spine hit the wall. I took care of you, Grace. I protected you, but you were so stubborn, always questioning, always resisting. You forced me to be more firm. You hurt me, I whispered. I disciplined you, he yelled, then stopped, taking a deep breath, clearly trying to control himself. No, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to let you provoke me into acting like the villain here. I've changed. I'm better now. He walked away, running his hands through his hair. I realized then that he was genuinely disconnected from reality. In his mind, this wasn't kidnapping. It was a rescue. He wasn't holding me captive. He was saving me, which made everything even more terrifying. The hours dragged on. Marcus tried to make it seem romantic. He offered me dinner he had prepared. I refused to eat. He showed me the new clothes he had bought for our fresh start, a closet full of dresses in my old style before he started to dictate what I should wear. He even showed me a new engagement ring he had bought. When you understand, when you really give me a chance, we'll start over properly, he said, holding the small velvet box. A real wedding this time. Kids, maybe. The life that was always meant to be ours. I felt like I was in a surreal nightmare. Every word he said, every gesture he made, was completely disconnected from the reality of the situation. He had kidnapped me, but he talked as if we were on a romantic retreat. I tried different approaches. I gently agreed, saying I needed time to process everything. He smiled, relieved, saying we had all the time in the world. I tried to appeal to his reason, explaining that this was a crime. He insisted there was no crime when it came to true love. I tried to make him angry, hoping he would become violent and I could use that to escape somehow. He just became sad, saying I was testing him, but that he wouldn't fall into the trap. When night fell completely, Marcus finally seemed to relax a bit. "You must be tired," he said, almost gently. "The room is ready for you. New pillows, clean blankets. I even left that perfume you liked." I looked down the hallway that led to the bedrooms and felt nauseous. "I'm not alone," he interrupted quickly. "You'll be sleeping alone. I'm not a monster, Grace. I'll sleep out here on the couch. I just want you to rest, to think about what we talked about. Everything will be clearer tomorrow." I didn't have much choice. When I tried to stay awake in the living room, he just stayed awake too, watching me with that unsettling intensity. Eventually, emotionally and physically exhausted, I went to the bedroom. The door had no lock. I put a chair against it anyway, more symbolic than effective, but it made me feel slightly better. I examined the bedroom window. It was small, but maybe I could fit through. The problem was the height. We were on the second floor, and there was nothing to cushion a fall. I sat on the bed, hugging my knees, trying not to panic. Salvatore must have realized by now that something was wrong. I should have been home hours ago. He must be looking. But how would he find me? No one saw where Marcus took me. My phone was discarded in some parking lot. I hadn't left any clues. I started to formulate a plan. Marcus would eventually have to truly sleep. When that happened, I would try the window. A broken leg would be better than staying here. I was considering my options when I heard Marcus move in the hallway. The doorknob turned, the chair held for only a moment before he easily pushed it aside. "I can't sleep," he said, standing in the doorway. The hallway light created strange shadows on his face. "I keep thinking about how I almost lost you, about how I could still lose you if you don't understand." "Marcus, please," "Shh," he said, entering the room. "I just need you to listen, really listen." And then he started to talk, and talk, and talk. Hours passed with Marcus sitting on the edge of the bed, spewing years of repressed anger, resentment, and a twisted obsession he called love. He talked about how he had tracked my every move over the last few months, how he had hired a private investigator, how he felt betrayed when he saw me with Salvatore. "But I forgive you," he said repeatedly. "I forgive everything. I just need you to choose me this time. Choose right." When he finally left the room, not because he was convinced of anything, but because he saw I was on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion, I knew I was in real danger. Not the kind of immediate physical danger, but something perhaps worse. Marcus planned to keep me there until I understood, until I went back to being his Grace. And how long would that take? Days? Weeks? I waited until I was sure he was quiet in the living room. Then, silently, I dragged the chair to the window. It was now or never. I was working on the window lock, trying not to make a sound, when I heard it. Footsteps outside, multiple. And then, much calmer and more controlled than I would have expected. A knock on the front door. Marcus froze in the living room. I heard him stand up quickly, probably looking for something, a weapon, a way to escape. The knock came again, and then a voice that made my heart almost stop. "Open the door, Marcus." Salvatore. He had found me. I ran to the bedroom door, opening it slightly to see. Marcus was standing in the middle of the room, paralyzed, looking at the front door as if it were the entrance to hell. "I don't know who you think you are," Marcus started to yell. "I know exactly who I am." Salvatore's voice came from the other side of the door, calm but charged with a lethal promise. "And you know too. That's why you're so scared right now. Open the door." "I'll call the police," Marcus tried, but his voice betrayed the panic. There was a pause. Then, "Do it. When they get here, they'll find Grace locked in an isolated cabin against her will." Kidnapping is a serious charge, Marcus, especially when the victim has a friend with good lawyers. I saw Marcus grab his phone, hands trembling. But he didn't dial. We both knew Salvatore was right. "Last chance," Salvatore said. And there was something absolutely final in those words. "Open the door or I'm coming in, and you really don't want me to come in." Marcus looked around desperately, like a cornered animal. His eyes met mine for a brief second, and what I saw there was no longer sick love or obsession. It was pure fear. Slowly, he walked to the door and unlocked it. The door opened and Salvatore stepped inside. Not with explosive violence or uncontrolled rage. He simply walked in, tall, imposing, and absolutely lethal in his calm. Vincent was right behind him, and two other men I didn't recognize flanked the entrance. But it was Salvatore who commanded all the attention in the room. His eyes met mine immediately, and I saw something flash across his face. Intense relief, controlled anger, and something deeper that made me want to run into his arms. "Grace," he said, just my name, but it was so full of meaning. I came out of the bedroom with hesitant steps. Marcus tried to get between us, a last pathetic act of possession. "She's fine," Marcus said quickly, the words stumbling over each other. "We were just talking. She came willingly." "Shut up," Salvatore said, his voice so cold the temperature in the room seemed to drop. It wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was an absolute order said, with a certainty that didn't allow for disobedience. Marcus fell silent immediately. Salvatore walked right past Marcus as if he were irrelevant. When he got close, his hands found my face with a gentleness that completely contrasted with the tension in his body. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly, his dark eyes scanning every inch of my face, my neck, looking for injuries. I shook my head, unable to speak. Now that I was safe, now that he was here, all the adrenaline that had kept me going began to dissipate, leaving only exhaustion and a tremor I couldn't control. Salvatore pulled me into his arms, and I sank against him, holding onto the fabric of his suit tightly, as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had become too unstable. "I've got you," he murmured into my hair. "You're safe now. I've got you." It was only then that I realized I was crying. Large, silent sobs that shook my entire body. Salvatore just held me, one hand on the back of my neck, the other firm on my back, anchoring me. After a long moment, he gently pulled me away, wiping the tears from my face with his thumbs. "Vincent will take you to the car," he said calmly. "Wait there for me." I grabbed his arm. "Salvatore, no." He understood what I was asking without me needing to verbalize it. "Don't do anything you can't undo. Don't become something you're not because of me." "I promised I would protect you," he said, holding my gaze, "and I will. But I also promised to do it the right way. Trust me." I looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He was furious. More furious than I had ever seen him, but he was in control. This wouldn't be wild violence. It would be something more calculated, more definitive. Vincent approached, offering his arm. "Let's go, Miss Peterson." With one last look at Salvatore, I let Vincent guide me out of the cabin. The cold night air hit me like a shock. There were two cars parked, Marcus's BMW and Salvatore's familiar black sedan. Vincent led me to the second one, opening the back door. "How did he find me?" I asked, my voice raw from crying. Vincent gave a small smile, the first time I'd ever seen him almost relax in my presence. "The boss tracked your phone to the cafe parking lot. Security cameras caught Marcus's license plate. It took some time to identify properties registered in his family's name, but he shrugged. Salvatore doesn't rest when it comes to protecting what's important to him." I sat in the heated car, still trembling. Vincent stood by the car, clearly on guard. The other two men remained near the cabin entrance. "What's he going to do?" I asked after a few minutes of tense silence. "What's necessary," Vincent replied diplomatically. "Nothing more, nothing less." Inside the cabin, the conversation between Salvatore and Marcus was happening with a silent intensity. I couldn't hear the words, but through the window I saw movements. Marcus gesturing desperately, backing away when Salvatore took a step toward him. Salvatore remaining eerily still, just talking, his posture radiating an authority that didn't need physical violence to be absolute. It lasted about 20 minutes. Then Salvatore came out of the cabin, leaving Marcus inside. He walked to the car with measured steps, his expression unreadable. When he got into the back seat with me, there was a change in him. The tension was still there, but there was also a finality, as if something had been definitively resolved. "He won't bother you again," was all he said at first. "What did you do?" My voice came out as a whisper. Salvatore held my hand, lacing our fingers together. I explained some facts to him. Facts that he needed to understand very clearly. Salvatore. Grace, he interrupted gently, turning to face me completely. Marcus Holden is a respected lawyer in Chicago. He has a reputation to protect, a career that depends on that reputation. I showed him evidence, security camera footage from the cafe showing him forcing you into the car, threatening messages he sent you, documentation that he brought you here against your will. Are you going to report him? I won't need to, Salvatore said, a small, cold smile touching his lips. Vincent has contacts who can get that information to the Illinois State Bar, to his firm's partners, to anyone who matters to his career. A single word from me and Marcus Holden loses everything he's built. He squeezed my hand gently. But I also gave him an option. He disappears from your life completely, no contact, no messages, no attempts to find you. He gets the professional help he genuinely needs. And in return, that evidence stays put. His career remains intact. His reputation is only stained by his own internal demons. And if he doesn't accept? He accepted, Salvatore said with absolute certainty. Because men like Marcus understand consequences. They understand power, and they understood very clearly that I have both, and I will not hesitate to use them if he makes a single move in your direction. Vincent got into the driver's seat at that moment. All set, boss? All set, Salvatore confirmed. We can go. As the car started to move, pulling away from the cabin and that nightmare, I looked out the back window. I saw Marcus standing in the doorway, lit by the porch light, looking smaller somehow, not physically, but in his essence. Defeated. Definitely defeated. The drive back to Kansas City was silent for a long time. I was nestled against Salvatore, his hand stroking my hair gently, my breathing finally evening out. I'm sorry, I whispered eventually. You have nothing to be sorry for. I lied to you. I went to meet Marcus without telling you. I thought I could solve this on my own, that I didn't need to drag you into my problems. Grace, Salvatore interrupted me, his voice firm but gentle. Look at me. I lifted my head from his shoulder to meet his eyes. You spent years in a relationship where you were taught that your problems were only yours, where asking for help was weakness, where trusting someone was giving them weapons to hurt you, he said, each word carefully chosen. I understand why you did what you did. I don't agree with it, and it scared me to my core when I realized you had gone alone. But I understand. You were right that night, I admitted, new tears stinging my eyes. When you said I always looked like I was ready to run. I ran from Chicago, and I was ready to run from this too, to solve it alone so I wouldn't involve you further. And now, he asked softly. Now I realize that running never made me feel safe. It just made me feel alone. Salvatore pulled me closer, kissing my forehead. You're not alone, not anymore. And I know it's hard to trust that after everything you've been through, but I will prove to you every day that you can trust me. That when you get scared, you can tell me. That when you have problems, we'll solve them together. And when I mess up again, I asked, my voice small. Because I will. I have so much baggage, so much fear still. Then we deal with it, he said simply. Grace, do you think I'm perfect? That I don't have my own demons, my own twisted ways of dealing with the world? I gave a shaky laugh through my tears. You built an empire in morally gray areas. Exactly, he agreed with a small smile. Neither of us is perfect, but maybe we can be imperfect together, learn together, trust together. When we arrived in the city, Salvatore instructed Vincent to drive not to my apartment, but to a property I didn't recognize. An elegant house in a quiet, clearly expensive residential neighborhood. Where are we? I asked. My home, Salvatore replied. You're not staying alone tonight. Probably not for the next few nights either. Normally, I would have protested, insisted on my independence. But I was too tired, too emotional, too grateful not to have to face the empty walls of my apartment alone. The house was beautiful, modern but cozy, with decor that surprisingly reflected personal taste, rather than just a display of wealth. Books on shelves, interesting art on the walls, spaces that felt lived in rather than just designed. Salvatore guided me directly upstairs, to a spacious guest room. There are clean clothes in the closet that should fit, he said. Private bathroom, towels on the shelf. Rest as much as you need. When he started to leave, I grabbed his hand. "Stay," I asked softly. I don't want to be alone." Something crossed his face. Surprise, tenderness, and something deeper. "Are you sure?" I nodded. So Salvatore stayed, sitting in the armchair near the window while I took a long, hot shower, washing the terrible day off me. When I came out, dressed in a large t-shirt he lent me, he was still there, now reading a book, clearly willing to stay all night if I needed him to. I lay in bed, and after a moment's hesitation, he came and lay down beside me, on top of the covers, keeping a respectful distance. But I extended my hand, finding his in the space between us. "Thank you," I whispered in the darkness. "For finding me, for not giving up." "Always," he replied, squeezing my hand. "I'll always find you, Grace. No matter where, no matter when. You'll never be lost alone again." And for the first time in 8 months, maybe for the first time in years, I slept deeply, knowing I was truly safe. The following days were strange and comforting at the same time. Salvatore didn't pressure me to go back to my tiny apartment. In fact, without ever making it a demand or an expectation, he simply made it clear that I had a place in his home for as long as I wanted. My toothbrush appeared in the main bathroom. Closet space was found. My camera had a dedicated corner in the office where the light was perfect for editing photos. It was gradual, organic, until one day I realized I had moved in without ever making a conscious decision to do so. And I didn't feel smothered or controlled. I felt at home. The biggest change came at the cafe. One morning, 3 weeks after returning to work, I found myself looking around the familiar space, the tables I wiped down every day, the temperamental coffee machine, the regular customers with their predictable orders. And I realized I was ready for something more. That night, during the dinner we cooked together, Salvatore insisted on teaching me traditional Italian recipes his mother taught him. I shared my decision. "I'm going to quit the cafe," I announced, chopping basil for the pesto we were making. Salvatore stopped stirring the sauce, watching me carefully. "Are you sure?" "There's no rush, Grace. You can stay there as long as you need." "I know," I replied, meeting his eyes. "But it's not about pressure or money. It's about being ready to pursue what I really want." "Photography," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "Photography," I confirmed. "I want to set up a real studio. Not something big or extravagant, but a space where I can work, where I can start building a professional portfolio. Maybe do some freelance work, cover local events, who knows, eventually exhibitions." The smile that lit up Salvatore's face was incandescent. "Then let's make it happen." "Salvatore," I began carefully, "about money." "No," he interrupted gently. "I won't just give you money. I know that's important to you. Your independence, your ability to build something on your own." I felt relief and gratitude in equal measure. "But," he continued, "I will make you a business proposal, a loan with fair and realistic terms that you can pay back once your business is established. And I will use my connections to introduce you to people who might need a talented photographer. The rest is up to you." It was perfect. He was supporting me without taking away my agency, helping me without making me dependent. "Deal," I said, extending my hand formally. He shook it, then pulled me closer. "Deal. Now let's finish this dinner before the sauce burns." I gave my notice at the cafe the following week. My colleagues were surprised but happy for me. Even my manager, who rarely showed emotion, said I always seemed too good to just be serving coffee. With Salvatore's loan and my own savings from working double shifts for months, I found the perfect space. A small shared studio in the Crossroads Arts District. A vibrant area of the city known for galleries, creative spaces, and the local art community. I would be sharing the space with a ceramist named Jenna and a graphic designer named Marcus. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me, but I found that it no longer bothered me so much. I spent weeks setting up my corner of the studio. Salvatore would show up after work, sometimes just to watch me organize equipment, sometimes to help me put up shelves or hang curtains that would control the natural light. Vincent showed up one day with an expensive ergonomic chair, because the boss said you were complaining about back pain. I mentioned that once, I protested, but I was smiling. "Once is enough," Vincent replied with his rare half-smile. I started taking on small jobs. First were family photo shoots, then some corporate events through Salvatore's connections, then a wedding, then another. My portfolio grew, and with it, my confidence. I discovered I had a particular talent for capturing unstaged moments. The stolen glances between newlyweds, the genuine laugh of a child, the vulnerability of a CEO during a break between meetings. My photographs had an emotional quality that people responded to, that made them feel truly seen. "You have a gift for finding the truth in people," Salvatore commented one night as we reviewed my latest work. "Not the version they show the world, but who they really are underneath." "I learned from the best," I replied, showing him a photo I had taken of him the week before, sitting in his home office, reading glasses on the tip of his nose, focused on some document, completely absorbed. It was an image of vulnerability and strength at the same time, of a powerful man in a private, human moment. "When did you take that?" he asked, surprised. "When you weren't paying attention, that's when I get the best shots." He pulled me onto his lap, kissing my neck. "You see me better than I deserve. Or maybe I just see who you really are." Salvatore was also changing, in subtle but significant ways. Vincent mentioned casually one night when he came over for dinner, something that happened occasionally, and I learned to like the serious man who was fiercely loyal to the man I loved. That Salvatore was gradually legitimizing more aspects of the business. "He's making long-term decisions," Vincent explained as we drank wine after dinner. "Fewer risks, more sustainability. Some of the more questionable partners are being quietly phased out." I looked at Salvatore, who was in the kitchen preparing dessert. "Why?" I asked softly. Vincent followed my gaze, then looked at me with an expression that could almost be fondness. "Because he's building something that's worth keeping, not just for him." The implication was clear. Salvatore was changing his world not just for himself, but for us, for a future that was worth protecting. This realization filled me with a complex emotion, gratitude, love, but also a responsibility that wasn't heavy, just real. We were building something together, and that meant my choices mattered too, that I wasn't just a passenger in his life, but an active participant. Isabella Moretti made one last attempt to cause trouble. It happened at a charity event Salvatore asked me to accompany him to, a formal gala at the city's most exclusive hotel. I was nervous, wearing a dress Salvatore had insisted on buying for me, elegant but not flashy, in a shade of dark green he said made my eyes sparkle. Isabella was there, of course, stunning in a provocative red dress, surrounded by powerful men who hung on her every word. She approached us during the cocktail hour, her smile sharp as glass. "Salvatore, darling," she cooed, ignoring me completely. "We need to discuss that investment proposal I sent you. Perhaps we could schedule a private lunch this week?" "Isabella," Salvatore replied, his voice cordial but with a clear edge. "Any business proposal can be discussed with my assistant. He'll schedule a proper meeting at the office with Vincent present." Her smile wavered slightly. "We were always able to discuss business more informally before." "Before was before," Salvatore said simply, his hand finding the small of my back in a possessive but comforting gesture. "Things have changed?" Isabella finally looked at me, truly saw me this time. And something in her face changed, recognition perhaps that I wasn't just a temporary distraction. "I see," she said coolly. "Well, I hope you know what you're getting into, Grace. Salvatore's world isn't for the faint of heart." Something in me, maybe the therapy, maybe the months of rebuilding my self-worth, maybe simply the certainty of Salvatore's love, made me smile. "With all due respect, Isabella, I've already survived the worst. Salvatore's world doesn't scare me." For a moment, Isabella seemed genuinely surprised. Then, surprisingly, she gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Not friendship, but reluctant respect. "Perhaps you are stronger than you look," she admitted. Then to Salvatore, "Take care of her, strong women are rare." And then she walked away, leaving us alone. Salvatore pulled me closer, whispering in my ear, "You were magnificent." "Just honest," I replied, but I was smiling. The true turning point came a few months later on a completely ordinary night. There was no grand declaration or cinematic moment, just the two of us in the studio that now felt as much mine as our home, working side by side on our respective projects. I was editing photos from a wedding I had shot over the weekend. Salvatore was leaning back on the small couch we had bought for the space, reading a book, That night, Dante's The Divine Comedy in the original Italian. Something he did when he was stressed because he found the rhythm of the language comforting. "Are you hungry?" I asked eventually, realizing it was almost 9 at night and neither of us had eaten a real dinner. "Always," he replied, closing the book. "Want me to order Thai from that place you like? The one with the perfect spring rolls? That's the one." While he placed the order, I continued working, adjusting the exposure on a particularly beautiful photo of the bride, looking at the groom with pure love. The kind of look that used to make me cynical, but now I understood completely. Salvatore came back, stood behind my chair, and looked over my shoulder at the computer screen. "Beautiful photo," he commented. "She loves him so much," I said softly. "You can see it in every inch of her body, in the way she leans toward him even when she's not touching him." "I know exactly how she feels," Salvatore murmured, his hands resting on my shoulders, massaging them gently. I turned in the chair to look at him. He was watching me with that intensity that no longer scared me, that I now recognized as pure, simple love. "Salvatore," I began, my heart suddenly racing with the clarity of what I wanted to say. "Have you ever thought about the future? Our future?" "Every day," he admitted, kneeling by my chair so we were at the same level. "I think about waking up with you every morning. I think about traveling together, about showing you the Sicily where I was born. I think about eventually having a family if it's something you want. I think about growing old with you, about having decades of nights exactly like this." Tears stung my eyes, good tears this time. "I think about those things too," I whispered. "And they don't scare me anymore. They used to, because with Marcus, the future meant a prison. But with you, the future means possibility." He held my face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears that had begun to fall. "Grace Peterson, you got into my car by mistake, and you changed my life completely. You made me want to be better, do better, build something that lasts. You gave me something I thought I had lost a long time ago, hope." "You gave me safety," I replied. "Not the kind that keeps me trapped, but the kind that lets me fly because I know there will always be a safe place to land." We stayed like that for a long moment, just looking at each other, letting the weight of the words settle. "It doesn't have to be now," Salvatore said finally. "It doesn't have to be soon, but one day when you're ready, I would like to officially ask you to be my wife." My heart soared. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that I want to spend my life with you," he interrupted gently. "But I also know you spent years in an engagement that suffocated you. So there's no rush, no pressure, just when the time is right for both of us, I want you to know that that's my intention. The pure honesty, the patience, the respect for my pace and my needs, all of it made me love him even more." "What if I told you," I began slowly, "that I'm more ready than you think? Not to get married tomorrow, but to know that we're building toward that, together." The smile he gave me was absolutely radiant. "Then I'd say I'm the luckiest man alive." The doorbell rang at that moment. Our food had arrived. We both laughed, the emotional tension breaking into something lighter and more joyful. The final scene of our story didn't happen in a grand moment, but in one of those small, perfect moments that define real life. It was a regular Tuesday, a few weeks after that conversation. I was at the studio, editing photos, a cup of now cold coffee next to my computer. Salvatore showed up unannounced, something he did often now, just stopping by to see me between meetings. Bringing Thai food from that restaurant I loved. "You're predictable," I accused him, but I was smiling as I opened the containers. "You're loved," he corrected, kissing the top of my head. We ate sitting on the floor among photographic equipment and unhung frames, a chaotic mix of our two worlds colliding in a perfect way. We talked about nothing and everything. A documentary I wanted to watch, a property he was considering buying to turn into a community space, plans for the weekend that involved just staying home and doing absolutely nothing productive. At one point, I grabbed my camera and photographed Salvatore off guard. He was laughing at something I had said, a spring roll halfway to his mouth, the soft studio light creating shadows and highlights on his usually severe face. It was an image of pure, uncomplicated happiness. "Let me see," he asked when he noticed. I showed him the camera screen. He looked at the photo for a long moment, something crossing his expression. I look happy, he said, almost with surprise. You are happy, I replied, not as a question, but as a statement. Salvatore carefully placed the camera aside and pulled me closer, until I was nestled against his chest, his chin resting on the top of my head. I am, he agreed, scarily happy, the kind of happiness I used to think was impossible for someone like me. And now, I whispered, now I know it was just impossible until I found you. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other on the messy studio floor, surrounded by the remains of our meal and the tools of our respective trades. There was no dramatic music, no grand declarations of eternal love, just two survivors who decided to stop running and start building something together. Imperfect, complicated, but genuinely ours. Eventually, Salvatore had to go back to a meeting. I had more editing to do. But before he left, he stopped at the door, looking back. Grace? Yes? Thank you. For what? He smiled, that real dazzling smile that transformed his entire face. For getting in the wrong car, I laughed, feeling warmth spread through my chest. It was the most right mistake I've ever made. When he left, I went back to the computer, importing the photo I had just taken. I studied the image, Salvatore laughing, unguarded, completely and absolutely happy. I saved the photo in a digital folder I kept just for us, a growing collection of captured moments that defined not a specific place, but a feeling. The feeling of finally belonging, the feeling of being home. The folder had a simple name, Us. And as I looked through the hundreds of images there, stolen moments and shared laughs, lazy mornings and nights working side by side, soft kisses and tight hugs, I realized that I had built exactly what I swore I would never want again. A shared life, a deep love, a future with someone. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't about losing myself in another person. It was about finding a better version of myself through the connection we built. Marcus had tried to own me. Salvatore chose to set me free. And I, who had spent so long running, finally chose to stay. 6 months later, on a sunny spring afternoon, Salvatore and I were on the porch of the house we now called ours, drinking coffee and reading the Sunday paper. My phone chimed with a notification, an email from a local art gallery. They had seen my portfolio and wanted to offer me a small solo exhibition of my photographs. Salvatore, I shouted, practically jumping out of my chair. You won't believe... But when I looked at him, I saw that he was smiling, not surprised. You knew, I accused. They may have shown me your portfolio a few weeks ago, he admitted, without regret. But the decision to give you the exhibition was entirely theirs. Your work sold itself. I should have been annoyed by the interference. But looking at that man, who used his connections not to control me but to open doors for me, who celebrated my successes as if they were his own, who still looked at me as if I were the most precious thing in his world, I could only feel overwhelming love. Thank you, I said, climbing onto his lap and kissing him deeply. For what? He asked when we broke apart. For seeing me, for supporting me, for loving me the way I always deserved to be loved. Always, he promised, as he had so many times before. In every life, in every world, in every version of reality, I will always choose you. And I, who once believed that love meant cages and control, now knew the truth. True love doesn't trap you, it gives you wings. And more importantly, it gives you a safe place to come home to when you're ready to land.